Hey there, planners. I am super excited today to begin breaking down my 2022 annual goals into quarterly actions. This is such an important step. This is how we get started. We get started in a way that is not going to burn us out. These are not New Year's resolutions that we're going to drop by the 15th of January. These are annual goals, and we're going to set ourselves up for success in the first 3 months of the year. So go grab your planners and let's get planning. All right, so if you missed the 2022 goal planning setup video, please go check that out. I'll have that link down in the description box below. But if you are struggling to figure out how you want to set up goals for the year ahead, how to really tie in goals to what's most important for you, what are some of the steps and processes you can use, that video is a step-by-step setting up my goals, how I set up my goals, the tools that I use, the process that I use. And it really doesn't matter what format you're planning in, whether it's digital or a notebook or a pre-printed goal planner. It doesn't really matter. It's more about the process that we use. So go check that video out. In that video, I set up my word of the year, which for this year is poise. I also went ahead and set up what my annual goals would be. And so I have 3 annual goals this year. That is significantly less than I have used in the past, but I really think I want to narrow in on these 3 areas for 2022 because this is what's rising to the top of my plate this year. The first goal is around mindfulness and really developing sustainable mindfulness habits to improve all areas of health, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. The second goal is all about my oldest daughter, getting her off to college, successfully preparing financially, emotionally, spiritually for sending her to college. And then the third goal is about this channel, clearly defining the brand of this channel to grow influence, community, and income of Planning Annie. So those are my 3 areas to focus on this year. And now the next step for me is to really work on breaking down each of those goals into the first quarter of the year. Now, when I did my goal setup video, if you remember, I did some brainstorming, and this is the results of that brainstorming. I've pulled it out of the goal planner and put it into this section of my planner. But I do have some brainstorming here. I actually want to solidify that for each one of these and just make sure this is actually what I want this to be. So I'm going to be working on this. I'm actually going to take my notes and slide them over and really make space to get serious about action tracking and planning for the first quarter of the year. All right, so I've moved over my sort of brainstorming session here for each of my goals. And what I have here is just each goal, spelled out: mindfulness, college bound, and personal brand, and, the Q1 heading. And so I kind of want to give myself a theme for Q1. That's where I want to start. And then I want to take my brainstorming in each of the areas and turn those into actual actions that I can then turn into monthly goals. I had this really great question. You guys ask the best questions on my videos, and they're always so thought-provoking. I had a really great question from a subscriber in the annual goal setting video about how to break down goals into monthly and weekly actions. And so my advice there, what works for me, is to start with quarterly, because jumping from an annual goal to a monthly action is almost too much of a leap. You're trying to take a single goal and split it in your mind into 12 categories, 12 steps, for each month to spread across the year. And to me, that's too much of a leap. So I really like to think about it in terms of quarters. How do I break the goal down into, 4 distinct sections? Kind of my theme for the first quarter of the year is really getting set up. I always tend to approach new issues, new goals, new challenges by first researching and educating myself. And that is really what the first quarter of the year is going to be. I'm going to be learning a lot, making sure that I educate myself in each of these areas that I have set goals, and then testing out, just early testing out. Sometimes I like to use the term piloting. So I'm going to pilot a few things to see, does this work? and what needs to be changed before I actually really commit to, fully pouring myself into certain actions, because I want to kind of check and adjust and learn as I go. And so that's really going to be my theme for the first quarter of the year. I'm going to go ahead and take a stab at writing in words what I just kind of rambled through, and come back and share with you what my theme for the first quarter of the year as it pertains to my goals is going to be. All right, so here's what I've come up with in words. For the first quarter, I'm going to invest the time and energy needed to learn in each of these goal areas. I'm going to balance the activities for learning and testing out new practices so that I am setting a foundation for goal achievement in 2022. I've brought in my word of the year, which is poise, and that's that balance. Poise is all about stability and balance and grace and dignity. And so I really want to make sure I am balancing my approach in the beginning of the year. A lot of times, there's long running jokes about New Year's resolutions that by, January 15th, we've kind of fallen off on New Year's resolutions. And I really believe that that has a lot to do with this balance. If we run headlong into a goal thinking that we need to accomplish everything in the first month of the year, we burn out. We burn ourselves out. This is really a marathon. It's a year-long, 365 days of activity to accomplish our goals. And so we really need to set a strong foundation. For me, that foundation is always in knowledge, understanding, planning, really planning out what are the best methodologies to approach this. And that's how I'm going to spend the first quarter. I will be testing out some things, but I'm not fully committing to, the specific actions that are going to get me to achieving these goals in the first quarter of the year. I'm really testing and learning and, eliminating some things, adding some things, solidifying some things. That's really going to be my theme for the first quarter of the year. So with that in mind, now I can start to think about how am I going to approach using this methodology? How am I going to approach each one of these goals for the first quarter? All right, so let's start with mindfulness. I'm going to flip back to the goal of mindfulness and just reread it. So my mindfulness goal is to develop sustainable mindfulness habits to improve 4 areas of health: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So one of the things I'm going to admit going right in is mindfulness is a fairly new concept for me. I spent some time really defining for myself what is mindfulness, and I gave myself a little bit of a definition as I was jotting down my goals. And so it's the practice of maintaining complete awareness without judgment of thoughts, emotions, or experiences on a moment-to-moment basis. Boy, that is something I am really not good at. I am all about thinking ahead, planning ahead, always thinking a step ahead. So being completely aware without judgment in the right here and now is very difficult for me. It's the ability to be fully present, aware of where we are and what we're doing without being reactive or overwhelmed. And then also that state achieved by focusing awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting the feelings, the thoughts, and sensations that are being experienced. So that is my sort of definition to root myself in. When I go back to that annual goal, I really feel like with that definition, I need to think about how this applies to each of these areas: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, because I haven't figured that out yet. And I think this is a really important point. A lot of times when we approach goal setting, we think we need to have everything figured out and all of the specific actions identified as we head into the first of the year when we're thinking about annual goals. That's never worked for me. I don't have it all figured out, which is why part of the goal is to take the early steps to really determine, how do I approach this? What does it mean? Really giving yourself the grace to not know what the specific actions are. So I think one of my first steps is going to be taking my definition of mindfulness and figuring out how does this apply to each of the 4 areas of health. So I'm going to go back to my quarterly breakdown and capture that in mindfulness as one of my first actions to really define mindfulness in each of those 4 areas. All right, so there's that first goal. The next thing, if I go back to my annual goal, ultimately my goal is to develop sustainable habits, which means I really need to know what are the habits. I don't even know right now what habits would I even practice in each one of these areas. So I really need to start researching what are mindfulness habits and how do they apply to each of these areas. So that's going to be my next goal for the first quarter of the year. The next step here for this goal is really about improving. And in order to get to improving, I have to be able to measure improvements. So I'm going to come back and add in a goal that involves improving, which means defining and tracking what improvements are going to look like. The last step here is going to be to put some practices in place early just to test things out and see what might work from my list. All right, so I spent some time on this first one really walking through how I wanted to do it. I'm going to go ahead and complete these same steps for the rest of the goals and come back and show you what they look like at the end. All right, so I've got my first one around mindfulness. I've also completed the second 2, which are 3 goals for the quarter for, getting my daughter to college. These include really developing a time-based list of all the major milestones and plugging those into my calendar, making sure I have visibility on what those are so I have a good, long-term view of from today until she actually gets to college, and maybe even a little bit further, probably through the end of the year. Also developing a financial plan outline based on her top 3 choices, because we don't actually know where she's going yet, but I can do kind of a high-level outline based on what I know about the top 3 choices. She could surprise me, but I don't think she's going to. And then the last item the last item for this one is to develop a prayer plan for my daughter in 2022 by month. There are some very specific things that I want to be praying about for her as she, takes on this new journey and kind of flies the nest. There are some very specific things I want to be praying about for her. The final item is around my personal brand goal. Step 1 for me is really to research and develop a personal brand outline. I'm saying outline here because I think I may take that a bit further as I get further into the year, but right now I just kind of want to capture what are the key elements, what are my initial thoughts there, kind of outlining it in the way I want to see it. The second goal is to establish consistent income and expense tracking, which I have not been good about. So I've really got to get specific about that, and I'm going to use this planner to do that. And then the third item is to gain a deeper understanding of the YouTube analytics and come up with a plan for how I'm going to apply what I've learned. There are tons of options out there to do this. I've really got to do a little bit of research initially to figure out how I'm going to approach this, but I know this is really important, and so I want to have that on the goal list. So that is the quarterly breakdown. Now back to the question from one of my subscribers around how do you go from annual goals to monthly? This is why this is so important, because I can take these and easily turn these into monthly goals. Maybe it is that I'm going to attack one of these each month. Maybe I attack a piece of this each month, but this really gives me the roadmap for what I need to accomplish in a 3-month span. And, gives me a little bit more meat to break it down to something that's attainable in a 31 day window. And hopefully this has been helpful to you as you think about how to break down those annual goals into quarterly focus areas. As you're coming into the first quarter, I want to stress again, I think it's really important that you don't burn yourself out. You've set great goals. Trust in that. Now you need to step into it fully, but step into it in a paced way that will not burn you out. You do not have to move mountains in the first month of the year. You don't have to move mountains in the first 3 months of the year. All you need to do is get yourself going. Get that motivation, build some confidence in your ability to tackle this goal. Make sure you have good measures for yourself in the first quarter of the year. I really hope that just seeing the process of breaking this down has been helpful to you. If so, let me know by giving this video a thumbs up. Leave any questions that you have down in the comments below, and subscribe to Planning Annie for more content like this. Stay tuned for my January goal planning session.